Welcome everybody. It's about 6 o'clock, so we're going to get started. Thank you all for coming. I'm Greg Duggan. I'm the town manager for Essex, and welcome you to a public information session and question and answer session, mostly focused on the town's finances as we're looking ahead to the coming year. You've probably heard that on July 1st, Essex Junction became an independent city. It's no longer part of the town of Essex. And so we as staff and the select board are starting to plan ahead and look ahead as to what the future of Essex is and what it looks like. And we're going to focus tonight probably on the financial part of that, the budget that's coming up for fiscal 24. That's actually starting in its planning phases very quickly. Also taking a look at the capital budget and taking a look at some of the American Rescue Plan Act money that the federal government has made available. So again, I'm Greg Duggan. I'm the town manager. Marguerite Ladd is over there at the other end of the table. She's the deputy manager. Select board member Don Hill Fleury is here tonight as well to listen. And Jen Nauer is a mediator and facilitator who's going to guide the discussion tonight. So with that, I will turn it over to Jen, and Marguerite and I almost turn it over to Jen. Marguerite and I have a couple of short presentations that we'll get through, but mostly we want to be able to hear from residents and hear from the people in the room today or online, and try to answer your questions and get some guidance as we go forward, putting together the budget and setting out the town's future. Now I'll turn it over to Jen.
It's no small task. So welcome everybody. It's nice to see you. Let's take a minute to welcome Ethan. I'm so glad you're here. No, not a problem at all. Just in time. So each topic, we do have 3 different topics to move through in approximately 90 minutes, which is a pretty short period of time. So we'll be toggling back and forth between on-air comments and in the room comments. Please share your comments on air if you're here, and if you're in the room, you just come up to this microphone here at the table. In the interest of hearing from as many voices as possible, I am going to give priority to folks who have not yet spoken, but the nature of tonight's conversation is that it overlaps so many different topics. You might have a topic in the first part of something to say in the first part of the meeting and then want to speak again, and we'll try to get to as many different people as we can. So far, it's a pretty manageable number, so that's hopeful. I don't know how many of you were around for last year's public session, but very similar format. I'll be taking notes on the shared screen so that those of you who are online and in the room can see how I'm making sense of the comments that you're adding. It's an aggregate list. So it's not a note that's word for word recording all the action that happens, but trying to get the gist of what you're trying to say. And to that end, you might find that I interrupt sometimes to make sure that I'm getting it accurately. I was going to say I can't guarantee that everyone will have a chance to speak, but I think we can if the numbers stay like this. Right now we have about 16 people online and we have 3 different people in the room from the public. So that's a manageable number. If there are still comments in the wings by 7:30, then we can sit back and assess our options for getting comments that haven't been shared yet. So I think, Greg, I now pass it back to you for the budget overview. So presentation followed by questions.
Correct. Share my screen here. So as I said, wanted to start taking a look at the financial picture that the town is facing and looking at in the coming year. This first part of the meeting, we'll take a look at the fiscal year 2024 budget. We are currently in.
Can we put it on that screen too so the audience can see it?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know how to do that. You do.
Sorry.
Let me see.
I'm sorry. I don't think.
Yeah, no, for those of you in the room, it'd be much easier to see the screen that's right next to you than the one up here.
Sorry.
Don, I'm not sure that we can, but we can try to angle this.
Just so they can.
You are welcome to shift your seats if that makes more sense in being able to see.
Does that help people out there?
All right, so we are currently in fiscal year 2023, which just started on July 1st. This is the last year that will include municipal property taxes from Essex Junction. The total budget for this year is about $16.7 million. That equates on the average assessed home in Essex to about a $1,600 bill for your municipal taxes. Your tax bill is higher. That's because the number that I'm showing up there does not include the Essex Westford School District taxes. Those make up about 75% of your tax bill. So just with that quick background, we're now looking at fiscal year 2024. It starts almost a year from now, but believe it or not, the planning starts now. We're going to have some big changes next year to consider and to keep in mind as the town puts together its budget. Essex Junction is now an independent city. Because of that, the town has lost about 42% of its tax base. There are some shared service agreements with the city of Essex Junction that the town has in place that will ensure some revenue coming in from the city of Essex Junction. So stuff like the police, the assessor's office are going to be shared for a little bit. So there'll be some revenue coming in from Essex Junction to help pay for the cost of those services or cover the cost of those services. What this means is that the town of Essex budget is going to decrease, but the tax rate, if the town wants to maintain its current level of service, is going to increase. Our goal as staff and is to bring a present a budget to the select board that continues to provide quality services to our taxpayers, and we want to put together a budget that puts Essex on stable footing for a predictable future, predictable financial future, and in a stable place that we can continue providing good quality services to our residents, to our community. That's not necessarily going to be easy. We recognize we have some challenges in the coming year. With no changes to maintain that service level that the town has expected and has gotten used to. In a vacuum, it's probably a 22 to 25% increase on your municipal taxes. For the average assessed home, that's probably about $350, $360. Again, that does not include Essex Westford School District taxes. Those are not part of this conversation. Those aren't affected by separation. They do their own thing on a year-to-year basis. The good news is that we do have some tools to look at and to consider as we put the budget together and bring information to the select board, to voters, to our residents. We can look for efficiencies. We do every year. I think it's going to be an extra close look this year at each one of our departments and the services they provide and how they provide them. We can look at raising revenue from non-taxes. That's your fees. That's your impact fees and service fees. We can cut services. If there's something that people feel like they no longer need, we can take a look at reducing the level of service. There's also some additional money available. You've probably heard about ARPA. It's the American Rescue Plan Act. It's some federal money that's come down after COVID. Essex has about $3.3 million of that. It can be used for a number of things. Marguerite's going to touch on that later on in the evening, so I won't get too far into it, but that's possible. The town also has fund balance each year. It's essentially savings. The recommended financial amount is to keep about 15% of your operating budget in fund balance. We do have some money, expect to have some money above and beyond that, especially if the budget itself is getting smaller. That frees up potentially some money into fund balance. So we can look at using some of the ARPA money and or fund balance money to mitigate that tax increase that is mentioned up there. So those are the kinds of things that we're keeping in mind. We do absolutely want to hear from residents and your thoughts, what you're thinking about. That's what tonight is the start of. There's going to be many other opportunities to weigh in on that. The budget schedule going forward, like I said, starting now, essentially, we're starting to look at the budget. Department heads will start putting their budgets together. We expect to have something to present to the select board by October. The select board is going to have its first budget workday in November. And then in December, and if we need to in January, we'll have the additional work sessions with the select board. We'll have the public hearings and be able to put together a budget by the end of January at the latest to put out to voters and bring to voters for consideration at town meeting day in March. Some additional considerations that we can touch on later on, but just wanted to mention them up now. I mentioned ARPA. We'll also touch a little bit on capital planning and budgeting, and as part of that, building needs that the town is looking at as well. So with that, I will turn that off and turn it back to Jen.
The questions, and what right now what I'm looking for are clarifying questions that you might have for Greg about the budget. If you're online or if you're in the room, you can raise your virtual hand so that we can see that you've got a question. I'm going to ask you at this point not to put them in the chat, but to share them on air. So we had you have one comment in the room. Come on up and ask your question, please.
If we could make sure we get people to say their name when they come up, that would be great.
My name is Jose Jimenez.
Uh-huh.
I am Walter Adams. I live on Indian Brook Road, have for 45 years, so I think I own about 10% of this building based on the taxes I paid. I have to admit that I have only had time to kind of peruse through the revenue side of the budget. I did ask the town finance office the other day to provide me a little bit of information about the end of fiscal 22 because it just ended. So she was nice enough to give me some preliminary numbers. So I have some. I'm a little reluctant. I don't want to say that the town planning or the town select board has a little trouble budgeting, but I certainly don't want to admit that I don't know what the result of 22 was, and we created a 23 budget, and now we're going to create a 24 budget off a 23 budget, and we don't even know how 22 ended up.
So Walter,
So I think,
what is your question?
all right, so here we go.
Because actually there's so
I would
many
agree
questions.
that it does appear to me, based on what they gave me, that 58% of the tax revenue will disappear. That 42, you had 42, I'm saying 58 is what's going to be left.
Yes.
On the revenue side. So there was the numbers always seem to jump around quite a little bit, but in the last year in 23, there was a budget line item in finance for $61,000 and I question whether that's a continuing amount or if that was a one-time only deal. So it won't show up again in 24 for revenue.
Is that a question that you can answer?
Do you remember where the 61,000 was?
All I got was a number. It doesn't, and it wasn't in 22. It was in 23, but I don't have any result for 23. Obviously, 23 just started, so we have no way of knowing. And the other question was, will we be sharing the police revenue at some rate with the village? Or there are two ways to think about it. It's going to be either a net deal with the village or the village just pays some percentage. And the other question I have is, how is that percentage calculated? Is it based on tax base? Is it based on people? And is it recalculated every year? So, because, like I said, I haven't got to the other side of this, which is the cost side, trying to identify in my own mind how that's going to work.
Mm-hmm. Part of what you're
and-
trying to figure out is the landscape of what you're seeing in those budgets overall. So do you have a question that you wanted to ask about the specifically?
Only the discussion of how is that police revenue going to be shared? Is it going to show up? I mean, last year it was 100 or in 22, they budgeted 62. It came in at $121,000. So if it's going to continue at that level, it's a pretty significant number. And if you're going to give up half of it to the village as part of the deal, then it really only shows up in your budget as half of that number, and depending on how you sugar that out. So I don't understand your tax basis or your financial basis, whether you're going to see a revenue line item that says, oh, the village is going to give us $2.8 million, and you're going to see it as a revenue, and you get to keep all of whatever the costs are, or
is
how
part of
that's going to work.
Is part of what you're trying to figure out is how that police budget will be shared in this.
Yes, and then the question would be, if it's going to be on a tax basis, then I already know the answer. If it's
Okay.
going to be on a population basis, then I would need to know what that percentage
Okay.
would be.
Do you have a,
I have an answer to the police, and I believe I think I saw Courtney raise her hand. She might have an answer to the finance question. Courtney's the interim finance director.
Yeah, she was the one who was nice enough to provide
Yeah.
the information to me.
the police question?
Sure.
first, then
Police
Courtney?
first. So the police services shared services agreement is going to be split. The cost of the police department is going to be split based on a per capita basis. The split between the town and the village, about 48% of the population. This is based on the 2020 census numbers. But 48% of the population is in Essex Junction, and 52% is in the town. The town is also assessing an additional 3.5% of the cost of the police budget to cover stuff like financial support, HR support, management support. So that gets tacked on as well. If there's any leftover money or savings at the end of the fiscal year, that money is then shared by the same ratio.
Does that help?
And unfortunately, because I never got to the other side of this budget yet,
Yeah.
those are my questions at this point.
Let's see.
I can do the 61,000. I think the 61,000 that you're referring to that you saw on the revenue line, you want to know if that'll be next year or in fiscal 24, I guess. And that's from fund balance. So no, that shouldn't be reoccurring again.
Okay. That brings another whole subject up, but I'm not going to get into it. I'm pretty disturbed that you split the fund balance up into all kinds of different places instead of showing it as one line item, because it seems to me that defeats the whole purpose of understanding how you're budgeting
It's hard
by
to
not
track.
having that fund balance be a line item that just says, okay, we put this much money into the deal to make it work.
And we
Right.
do have that. We do have those numbers. We can touch base after this meeting and get you how we assign that each year.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Helpful. So I'll go to online next and then back to the room. Any other questions around the budget? I mean, I'm sure there are questions, but are there any questions you'd like to ask right now around anticipating budget fiscal year 24? Anyone online, you can raise your virtual hand or you can turn on your video if you want to let us know that you've got a comment. You can wave to me if you've got a comment, or you can raise your virtual hand either way. Let's go back to the room then. Any other questions in the room? And we'll come back to you, Walter, if we have a chance. First, go right ahead.
Jen, can I just jump in? If anybody online is looking to raise your hand, if you go to the bottom of the screen, you should see an icon for a reactions button. If you click on that, there's a raise hand function there.
Over Mary's iPad, that she unmuted, but then nothing happened.
Me when you're ready.
Go right ahead, and then Ross will go to you online.
Hey, I'm Ken Signorello. I heard Walt got preliminary numbers for the fiscal year 22, just wrapping up, and wondered if there is going to be a surplus, projected surplus, or deficit for year 22.
We're going to have to wait for some more numbers to come in. The final numbers won't be done until the audit is complete. We're pretty close to budget. Beyond that, I haven't had a chance to really confidently say what the numbers are.
Oh, okay. Well, Walt said he-
I leaned at numbers. I didn't get them.
Okay, okay.
Ken, did you have other questions?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay. Ross, go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned for the expected tax increase based on the average residents. What is the valuation of the residents that's based on?
That's based on the average assessed value of a home in Essex is $280,000, and that's the assessed value, not the market value.
Okay, thank you.
Ross, does that answer your question?
It does.
Courtney, did you have something you wanted to add? I saw a raised hand up there.
I just wanted to add that those FY22 numbers are changing daily as we continue to accrue revenues and expenditures that relate to FY22. So, excuse me. Just wanted to remind everybody that we're still in the modified accrual period So again, those are preliminary numbers, and the audited numbers will, the final audited numbers will come out in January.
In January of 23. Other questions related to the budget fiscal year 24, namely? Let me see if there's any online first before I go back to repeat. So, so if you are online and you're trying to get my attention, there's a couple ways to do it. You can raise your virtual hand by sort of moving your mouse over the screen and either go to the reactions toolbar or over your camera, your photo. You might have 3 dots you can click on. You can send a chat if you have something to say, or you can turn on your camera and wave. Go ahead, Walter.
2 years ago, I remember that the town entity as an entity had a vote on the 1% of the taxes be set aside for social spending. And I wondered what the actual split result was of that vote between the village and the town. And if the town voted no, now that we're not together, does that mean that that 1% is no longer valid in the current budget? And that we would have to either vote for it again or suggest reducing that number back to an ongoing basis number and not some fixed dollar value, depending on what the budget might to be spent.
Greg or Courtney, do you have in perspective on that?
Yeah, that vote was back in, I believe, the 1980s. I do not know.
Seems to me, I remember it being a lot sooner than that, because I wouldn't. That was a long time ago.
Yeah. No, I'm almost positive. I can double check that, but I'm almost positive it was the 1980s. I want to say 1987. I do not know the town-village split as far as it changing. It's not something we've really considered, that I've considered.
Well, I'm only suggesting because if obviously the town voted no and the village voted yes, now it's just the town. So the question becomes, is it legal for you to collect the 1%, I guess?
I would say it's still legal until it becomes, someone proposes that it votes on it to not do it that way. But it was voted on as for the town of Essex. We are still the town of Essex.
Okay. We can see that one in different fashions.
You're noting the question.
The other issue that I have is, have you had any discussions with CCTA and what the effect of separating from the city is going to have on their proposed budget to us? And has anyone decided that budget makes sense, having seen it?
We have had
like a
discussions.
lot of money.
Yep. We have had discussions. It was looked into probably about a year and a half ago when Essex Junction was looking at separation and preparing their budget. I forget, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I want to say out of the $300,000 assessment from Green Mountain Transit each year, the majority of that was going to be assessed to the new city. Whether or not the remaining amount is still worth it for the town, that's a conversation for the coming fiscal year and as we do our budget preparation.
Okay, those were the 2 other things that I wanted a little clarification for,
Great.
or some identification of. Thank you very much.
Thanks. So a final pass for questions, and then we will move towards input in case there's people waiting to have comments. Are there any other clarifying questions on the budget fiscal year 24? Ethan, you have a question?
It's just I think it'd be very clarifying for everybody, but we talked about a budget increase of 22 to 25%. Do you have the tax rate increase on the top of your head for cent wise? I think that'd be good just to have there.
Not off the top of my head. I mean, I said in that, yeah, I don't have it off the top of my head. Sorry. Can get it. We can
You're
get
thinking
that.
it's a helpful number because
To see that it's 25 cents or 35 cents.
try to anticipate what the actual amount
Yeah, I
might
mean,
be.
you can say 22 to 25 in original box were anywhere between
Mhm.
16 and 35 because we didn't know. So if we have an not percent, but a value to the increase, more meaningful to property owners who know that they have
Mhm.
X amount of dollars in property.
You're looking it up.
Some outdated numbers from something Sarah Macy, former finance director, had put together. It's probably in the 12 to 14 cent range, going from about
Like I remember,
Yeah.
25 was
5 cents or 25%.
25%.
Okay. Other clarifying questions?
That'll be for next meeting.
Sorry, Ethan, did I cut you off?
No, you're good. I'm just giving you like a note. There's no pass.
Anticipating,
for
yes, it's another
Wednesday,
two.
or next Wednesday.
Well, So are there any other clarifying questions online or in the room? I'm assuming that we're ready for input, and I do want to reserve some time for there if we can. So I'm preparing to move on, but I don't want to be leaving anybody out. Okay. So this is, here's what I'm preparing to do for the two of you, is to move into this question about level of services, cost of services. Is that where you thought I was going to go, Marguerite, or am I skipping over a presentation you had?
No.
No, okay. Here's the couple things to say first. I am preparing to ask for comments, if you have them, around level of services and cost of services. I have a couple things to say, just because it's a tricky conversation to have in a short time frame. Want to acknowledge that so many services are important to a community's well-being, and you won't always know how your neighbors value or how they feel about those decisions. So some of the valued services that are monumental to them may be hidden to you, and vice versa. And that makes this conversation a little awkward to step towards. We're still stepping towards it though, because one of the starting places at least is to try to understand, when you look at the budget scenario and try and figure out which services do you retain and where do you cut back if you need to. This is an opportunity to lend some insight about how you're weighing those choices. So it isn't easy, but nonetheless, there is interest in knowing how you're thinking about those things. We'll talk first about level of services and then go to the capital needs. If they start to get a little intermingled, that's okay. That's and also understandable. Anyone, before I take comments, I'm wondering how many of you have something to say here. Here are the questions I'm going to be asking. What services are crucial? And in a sentence or two, why, or your rationale? What services could you live without? And again, in a sentence or two, why? And if there's room for it, what services could you live without but are really important to the community's well-being, knowing that there's nuances here? I'm going to share my screen so that you can see them up front in case you like to look at those prompts. Oops, I can't share screen. Can you give me a co-host? And format here is very similar. We're going to start with Natalie because I see that her hand is up, and we're going to take some comments online, and then because there's more people online, I'll go with whoever I haven't heard from yet today and prioritize those voices. Hey, Natalie, let me see if I can share my screen first before you begin speaking. There, it looks like you can see that. So Natalie, as you speak, I'm not going to be recording word for word, but I am trying to get the gist of what you'd like to say so I can capture it. I may be quiet first, and then I'm going to try to write down the kernel of that piece. Go right ahead.
Okay. And really, it's not about a service that we have in fully in place right now. I really wanted to speak to the use of the ARPA funds.
But towards the end, but is there,
okay, great.
Is there something you want?
I'll come on later then.
Okay. Let's
all right, great.
ARPA conversation towards the end. And one of the thinking there is that the ARPA is just another moving piece in this budgetary puzzle. And so just let's cover a little bit of territory and then we'll come back to that. Natalie, I'm going to make a note. Okay.
Sure.
First.
Okay.
Any other comments? And you can let me know by turning on your video or your microphone or raising your virtual hand. Lorraine, go ahead.
A quick question. I don't even really know. Is there a way to list what the services are? Because I wouldn't even know what to pick from, right? So, and I'm probably not alone in that. So,
Yeah. I imagine you aren't. So I don't know if there is a way to list them all unless you're looking. How would people find out I mean, there are so many, right? That's part of what you're underscoring.
Lorraine, I think probably the quickest thing to do would maybe go to the town website, essexvt.org. If you go to government services, if you look at departments, that's probably the quickest, highest level way to see what services are being provided by each department. Then we also have our boards and committees and select board that provide different services, often on a volunteer basis. Your taxes are mostly paying for the departments that are listed on the website.
right. Because my understanding is that almost the bulk of all our committees, unless they're taking the stipend, is free for us, other than overhead for using the room maybe or whatever, right?
Yep, and that's why I would focus on the department level services.
So do you have examples of what department level services might be?
That's your public works department, your parks and rec department, manager, finance, IT, assessing, clerk's office, human resources,
Dev.
community development, police, fire. Okay.
Rescue.
Rescue.
So another way to think about this question might be,
And I'm sorry for any department I forgot. I'm going off the top of my head.
The rescue is
All
not
very
a department
important.
of ours.
No, but we
Correct.
But then that's a whole other list that I
that's
can
another
list.
okay.
Yeah.
But here's a one way to answer the question without
It's a different
necessarily
category.
needing to choose from a list that's bound. Another way to think about this is what services are you paying attention to that are crucial and that you'd like to have maintained? And it's a valid comment whether or not it actually fits into a neat category. There's still some perspective there.
Right, because the other part of that question to me as a taxpayer is I'm not sure which ones also bring in revenue, so in terms of the balance sheet. So that would impact my answer as well.
Yeah, there are two pieces here. There's the level of service in terms of what you're experiencing it versus the cost and the trade-offs. Yeah.
Jen, is that a way of saying that services that produce revenue and generate income are worth keeping around? Is that what you're insinuating, Lorraine?
I'm insinuating, I guess, that there are probably places that, not to pick on anyone, but for example, that the Essex Rescue, who I believe we donate money to, and is a vital service, because they are not first responder status, they are not as available to be able to bring in revenue. For example, like fire department, if they combine with the fire department, we might be able to get more granting opportunities to help fund that, as opposed to just being from the tax base. So to me, it's more about, are we turning over rocks? Are we thinking creatively like that? I wouldn't want to cut that service at all, but I would want to look at a way to balance the sheet better in terms of bringing in revenue. So it's a hard. I can't imagine wanting to cut any of those services you listed. So to me, it's more about trying to explore how to bring in more revenue and be smarter about it, and seek more grant opportunities.
Can I just add
Yep.
something there too? Also, just if you look at the fiscal year 23 budget, that might help a bit. Just understand a little bit about which departments bring in revenue. Where you can see then, like Walt's looked at revenue, where there's some fees or something like that that pertain to the department. Just that's helpful to get lists for ones if one's looking over this of what exists and what's out there and what's funded versus then what they bring stuff in or not.
Yeah, and I think, Lorraine, part of your comment might be trying to underscore that you're trying to frame this as widely as possible and explore ways to bring in more revenue rather than be framing it as which services need to be cut or retained, which is absolutely part of the mix.
And I would point out, if you look at the 23 budget, part of the problem with looking at the revenue side of it is we hid the unbalance in the revenues. As we talked about just a minute ago, that in the finance department, it looks like they're bringing in $61,000. Well, they're not.
Mm-hmm.
You're stealing money from our other pocket and claiming it as income there instead of putting it in a line item that says transfer from fund balance to balance the budget. So you gotta be a little careful when you look at those numbers. I mean,
Yeah, so
is a
part of what,
$2.5 million, $3 million police department worth $121,000 in revenue? Well, there's a lot more to the police department than what it brings in for revenue.
that's right. Yep.
So, do I think we should eliminate the senior bus? No, I don't think so.
So I'm gonna,
Do I think, you know, that the Parks and Rec Department charges me $30 to go to Indian Brook? Do I think that's a fair number? No, I don't. I think that's
So,
outrageous,
Walter,
but
part of what I need to be able to do is to capture some of these things that you're weighing, but be able to capture them in a way that's not just in the conversation here, but that gets into my notes.
there's no easy
way.
Conversation
So-
here, and part of that is you're gonna have to eliminate the whole process of finance, because I can't, if
So
somebody's
Let me time out.
investment it down to, it cost us 65 grand to run those senior bus, but that
Yeah.
senior bus is wickedly important for the people who
Yes.
use it.
So I'm gonna ask
So
for
there it is.
the focus of, and in part it is because this is a very complicated conversation and it's not going to get all rounded out and problem solved in this evening for sure. But when you think about and pay attention to the services that are crucial, and this is an invitation that's going to go out widely to any participant in this meeting in the room and online, what are those services that are crucial? What services could you live without? What services, to Walter's point that you were just making now, could you live without but are really vital to the community's well-being? Do you have any of those comments that you'd like to capture here that I may have missed? And again, that invitation goes to all of you online as well. You just need to raise your virtual hand or give me an indication that you have a comment to share. And Walter, I do want to come back if there's a piece in there that I can reflect here. I'll just need your help in translating it.
This one, sorry. I know that I pick on Green Mountain Transit significantly because the number has been huge. And I'm sure at certain times, there's lots of people on that bus, the rest of the time, it's nothing. So, so I have to wonder why, you know, CCTA or whatever you want to call them, Green Mountain Transit, isn't running some kind of Sprinter van instead of a 96-foot long bus down our streets.
So you would
for
say,
4 people.
look
But
at CCTA Transit.
That's a Green Mountain Transit issue that I
Right.
can't really deal with. Well, we're going to pay less money, but it's still a significant chunk of dough. So you have to decide whether that chunk of dough is worth what
So
it is
here's
helping
how I'm
for
gonna,
our community, and the same thing applies to the 1%.
Excuse me,
Now,
Walter.
You do understand it.
Right, no, excuse me.
Essex is the only community.
Walter, I'm so sorry, but it's so complex. I'm so full of the information. I won't be able to actually use it very well. But one thing I am able to grab, I think, out of this piece is, for example, something very concrete. Look at transit systems and alternatives and what those costs are. Ken, you were noting that CCTA, some of these nuances might have been taken care of by town versus village. Yeah.
It sounds like the senior bus is a service that's crucial.
Can I make a suggestion about the list?
You can. I may or may not take it. You can
Well,
go right
okay.
ahead.
But instead of saying what services are crucial is very good, but instead of saying what services could you live without, or what services could you live without, or being important to the community, why couldn't it be what services could we look at to pick certain items of? It's not that somebody doesn't want this
So
service.
it's not an all or nothing.
It's that they have things inside of that service that they've found could be changed,
Mhm.
rather than making it about eliminating something. Because truthfully,
Yeah.
we can't eliminate any one of our services, but there are parts in the services that could be looked at.
It's a very thoughtful addition, and it's something that the right words might even pop up while we're sitting in this conversation. But I think part of what you're trying to underscore is doesn't have to be an all or nothing. So what are the services in particular, if there's an element of them that you might look at finding an alternative for? Or what would you retain out of that service versus constrain or lessen?
And to that point, the 1% that's collected hides a lot of services town pays for that most of the people in the town don't have any idea they're paying for.
What are some of those
I
services
have
that,
no idea. I don't
Okay.
have, it doesn't, you don't break it down, and it's a decision that the select board makes. So I have no way of knowing
Mhm.
where that last year $150,000 went. So, and this year it'll be a little less than that, closer to 100,000 now. I want to put budget.
Depends what the budget is. We have all that on our website. Again, let's touch base after the meeting and I can get you that.
It's sure that each one of those people is more than grateful for those funds. That's
So-
the nature of those services.
Walter, it feels so disrespectful for me to do this. I do need to actually move on, even though I know there's some pieces of your comments that I have missed. And the reason I'm doing that is because I know there's other voices that potentially either have things to say about services, or we're going to go to capital needs here in just a moment too. Lorraine, I see your hand is up. I do want to take a quick pass to see if there's anybody else online or anyone who hasn't spoken yet who had a comment around services that are crucial to retain or services that you might think about adjusting. To Ethan's point. Is there anybody saying a comment? Rachel, go ahead. Is that Rachel? Am I pronouncing that well?
Sorry. Yes, perfect, Rachel. And I apologize. I've been listening to this on the go, and this may be the wrong insertion point here for this comment, but I can be corrected. I wanted to first thank the town for doing this. It's vitally important. However, I will say that if I may offer some criticism, this is not enough to reach the people where services matter. And I can understand that, business as usual has been holding these forums, which is great. I think that there has to be more outreach by the town in a different way, and not just surveys and forums to get this information out. That's just my 2 cents. And also, 6 o'clock is really tough for families, really, really tough. And families in this town, I feel like a broken record, are so underrepresented.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the people in this town that need a lot of these services. And then switching gears, I just want to make a quick statement about something that I feel like we keep glossing over here. That for the last, I don't know, 2 years, we knew about this impending tax increase. And to be quite honest with you, that it could have been avoided. And now we're looking at 20% or whatever it is, that ballpark. But this is like, we've been watching these, these hearings for January 6th, and they talk about the big lie. Well, this happened. People were denying that this tax increase was going to happen as a result of separation, and it ran like wildfire. And yep, I'm going to wrap up, I promise.
Well,
But
I'm wondering if there's a question in there.
Yep,
so-
I'm getting to it.
Okay. I mean, no, I
Um,
wondered if I'd actually heard a question in your comments, which is around percentages. But go ahead.
Oh no, I mean the percentages. I'm sure I'm wrong. It's like whatever it is, 20-25%. But this campaign to deny that this tax increase was going to happen, it's kind of mind-boggling. And it included members of the community and members of the select board. And this was coming. And I get that we can't go back, but here we are having to talk about making cuts to services. And to wrap this up, there's no services that I believe should be cut.
Yeah.
I mean, we can go round and round and round, but these are vital services. I mean, we can talk about the minutia of little line items, but that is not going to make a dent in this impending tax increase. And that's where we are, and this could have been avoided. That's it.
So, there was time for questions before, but also comments. And I think part of what's in that comment is this, again, acknowledgement that it's really hard to be looking at the situation and trying to weigh really tough decisions. Even the way that these questions are framed about services that are crucial when they are all crucial to somebody. And which services could you live without or adjust? Still a painful question to ask. And a hard one to consider, which is in part, I think, these questions might be really awkward and not the right way or not the easiest way to ask them. It's still the question that people who are trying to make an informed decision about the budget fiscal year 24 are trying to figure out how you're thinking about them. So, Lorraine, I see that you have your hand up and I think you've spoken before, so I will come back to you if there's no other comments of anyone else who hasn't spoken yet. Specifically, what I'm looking for is an answer to these prompts. Services that are crucial that you're paying attention to, services that you would suggest adjusting or looking at again. Any comments specific to that, online or in the room? Lorraine, go ahead.
Thank you for bringing up the senior bus and the CCTA transit, because it's things like that I'm understanding there are opportunities like the micro busing system. So that's when I say, and the previous caller, in terms of the level of services that we have, I think I can't see cutting any of them, but re-looking at them and understanding how to make them less expensive or bring in revenue to offset some of the increase. I disagree with the previous caller. I knew that my taxes were going to be increased whether I merged or not merged, and we had not gone through the discussion, the merge process, whether how we were going to deal with the impending increase in terms of services. So anyway, we're here regardless of either way this went, and I appreciate this opportunity. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Lorraine. So I'm going to suggest that we go to capital needs and see what sorts of questions and comments that brings up. Do you have, Marguerite or Greg, presentation on that piece? Okay.
I do.
Let me stop sharing so you've got some space on the screen.
Okay, capital needs, similar story and concept as far as the operating budget. The town's losing about 42% of its property tax base, or has lost about 42% of its property tax base. The numbers that we just ran through for the fiscal year 24 operating budget, that included replenishing the capital tax to keep it generating the same amount of revenue roughly as it had been in the past with that loss of 42%. That's the money that helps fund our infrastructure, our roads, our sidewalks, our pipes, our buildings, our large vehicles. We were getting to the point that right now the capital tax is 2 cents. And even that was not really covering our capital needs going forward. So we wanted to, at minimum, keep us where we were at as far as the revenue that's coming in. It's also money that can be used to leverage additional money, grant funding from the feds, from the state. We have a pretty detailed capital plan that goes out each year. To complicate things again this year, we're looking at the possibility of what that looks like for our buildings. We have buildings needs. For instance, you can see up here the fire station is getting a little bit small for what it is and what it serves. There's a need for new vehicles, especially as the community grows, as larger, taller buildings go up. In town, for the fire station to be able to have the vehicles to serve those buildings. That's something that needs to be looked at. The town offices, right now we are sitting in the city of Essex Junction in the town offices. Don't know quite what the appetite is for new town offices, but it's something that has come up in conversation and that we've heard before about having a new town office within the town of Essex. The library is having a need for additional storage space, programming space. Recreation could use programming space. The senior center is currently at 2 Lincoln Street. That's the city hall, city offices in Essex Junction. It's going to be there or somewhere through 2023, December 2023, based on shared services agreements. After that, the future is a bit uncertain. Public Works has some possibilities as well. A new salt shed would allow them to keep a larger stockpile of salt in the buildings. That'll save money in the long run, be able to help with planning and predictability. Depending on a fire station, Public Works could rearrange some things, free up some office space. So there's a lot of possibilities of what the town can look at through its municipal buildings. The select board had a strategic planning session back in May. There was interest in looking at a new municipal complex that ties into the building needs. Staff has begun to take a look at what those facilities needs are, what they might actually look like beyond just ideas. So we can start to assign some price tags and start to look at funding options to pursue those if that is the desire. We want to share that with the select board and residents. Pretty much overlapping with the fiscal 24 budget schedule, so we can have kind of a whole comprehensive financial picture of what the town is facing. With that, I will wrap up the capital piece and turn it back to Jen and to anybody with questions and comments and feedback.
Let's start with questions. So are there clarifying questions around the capital needs? And again, a show of hands first before asking the question so I can get a sense of volume would be great. There's at least one comment in the room, I believe. Any questions online? Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, so this is we've identified this as capital needs, and yet it sounds like there's still a great deal of uncertainty as to whether you would actually go forward with, let's say, replacing 81 Main Street with another building. So is it really a plan, or is it at this point, is it just a brainstorming? Because it seems to me it could, if the answer is let's just stay put, then it seems to me there's a whole lot of capital that's opened up. And the reverse is also true.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of both. Stuff like the salt shed, the fire department, those have been identified in the capital plan. We've been aware of that for a little bit of time and starting to set some money aside to do some studies. As far as a new town office, that had not been in the capital plan. And frankly, it's, I list it with capital because it's a buildings thing. It is a bit separate from that. We raise about $550,000 a year, give or take, through our capital tax. That's not going to fund a town office anytime soon. A lot of these buildings are probably, depending on the extent of it, is probably looking at a bond issue. Maybe there's some grant money, maybe there's some of that federal money, but it's probably a bond conversation. So as far as like a new town office, yeah, that's more of a brainstorm. That's putting an idea out there and seeing where it lands. Some of it is a bit more specific, a salt shed, public works offices, stuff like that might be able to be done a bit more easily.
My only follow-up, Greg, is do you know, and maybe it's too early to know because the legislation only just passed and like our committee was just starting to look at it last night, but the Municipal Energy Resilience Program, I think it was Act 125, that's supposed to provide funds beginning in 2024, I think, to, for municipal buildings for basically cutting over, getting off of fossil fuel. Can those funds be used in theory to replace buildings altogether or to like consolidate multiple buildings into a single municipal complex?
That's a great question, and I'd love to look into it more. And our buildings person, Tom Yandow, is here, giving a maybe kind of look to me. So I think it's something that we can look into and explore and definitely keep in mind. Thank you for that suggestion.
Walter, did you have a question?
No. I have a comment, but I can't call it a question.
Hold it.
Very concerned.
Okay, hold
Given
it.
what we spent for the police station, that the concept of building a new town garage, a new.
So Walter, actually, it's going to be hard to hear you unless you come to the microphone.
This community has a history of overspending money like it was Swiss cheese, whether it be the select board or whether it be designed by committee. We have a police station that needed a new driveway and parking lot 2 years after it was built. I hear it has humidity issues and it costs $7 million. You just spent $2 million in this building and suddenly, we're going to have to replace this. Like, what? What'd you spend $2 million for?
So you,
So I'm sitting here going, you know, as far as I'm concerned, I would be more than happy to say you collect your $550,000, you put it in a bucket, and eventually something will sugar to the top that says this is what we have to spend money for, and it's time to stop trying to design by committee, because every architect worth his salt is going to make sure that every wish of every person gets included in that building, whether it's of value or not.
so
And
part
if
of
you
what
don't say, this is our budget, period, and say you can't exceed this, pick the things that you want that fit this budget.
Yep.
It's no different than budgeting for the rest of it. Just because you're a municipality and can bond for $8 million
So this might
doesn't
feel
mean
like
you should.
this might feel like a tight fit, but let me see if I've got it. That one of the things you'd be cautious about paying for is a large investment in buildings, unless there was, and the reason your rationale or thinking behind it is, it's hard to make sure that that's a sustainable plan or a sustainably planned venture.
Well, the issue I have is they spent $7 million building a new police station, and nobody bothered to mention that it would cost somewhere close to 60 grand in additional electric,
Okay.
gas, and
Yeah.
janitorial services to take care of it.
So you're worried
every
about
year,
you're
forever.
worried about hidden costs and hidden continuing costs.
Yeah, and the more you do that, the more you have a wonderful excuse for making sure that our budget goes up.
Okay. So i.e.
what's
like
going on.
operating costs for a new building, et cetera, which ultimately people will find more and more efficiencies for that. But part of what you're worried about is what are the hidden continuing costs, even if there's an upfront thing that you can
and-
plan around.
And I came and made my case at the police station, but that didn't seem to
Okay.
just water off a duck's back.
Thank you. So others in the room or online, and I have these question prompts up here to try to guide the conversation, and I've not been so successful this evening in doing that, but I think that's par for the course, and it's par for trying to wrap your arms around a complex situation, and budgeting's not easy. Ken has a comment. Is there anyone online who has one? And specifically what I'm asking for is, what would you be willing to pay for regarding capital needs if it meant paying more? And what would you be cautious about paying for? Go ahead, Ken.
Building on the municipal building capital issue. The only thing I ask is that whatever we do, it's done in a consolidated, comprehensive plan. So that we're not thinking about individual buildings one by one, thinking about a municipal master campus, and each step we make is towards that realization. And I just want to point out that, yes, we have all these buildings that are all over the place. It's true, but they aren't worth nothing. So we will have, let's say, this building, there'll be revenue from the sale of it. Now that the village is queued up for a right of first refusal. So at the very least, we'll have two competing bids. So there's and if the fire station needs to be upgraded, that building will be for sale also. And that would go towards a consolidated campus, which is really what I'd like to see us focus on, so that we're not doing it piecemeal as we start to shift. So shift into something consolidated as opposed to one by one.
Okay, I see. So what you'd be willing to pay for if it meant paying more is shifting towards a consolidated.
Well, with the ARPA money, it'd be nice to at least use part of that to have that master plan prepared. So at least we have a framework to work towards that is thought through, maybe a 5 or 10 year plan, and then we can start looking at the individual buildings and see what we might get for the sale of it and what a new one will cost, and the net expense that has to be outlaid, and continue to put those buildings into the location that might be purchased under the master plan.
Let's see can you look at the screen, see if I've got it. Shifting towards a consolidated, I'm just going to say building complex.
And your municipal campus.
And your idea, the underlying that is that this may require significant time, energy, and expense in the long term, but having that master plan.
Yeah, you can work towards it step by step.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that, we always talk about a walkable community. It would be nice if all the staff could meet without driving and just walk across a parking lot. imagine a complex like that where you have the police department on one side in the end, fire department, public works, town office, maybe in a large, like a mall, sort of.
Well, it could be conceived in many
The
different ways.
municipal mall.
But the overall piece is, if there's going to be a consolidated plan, like to think about it in terms of a master plan that you can work in phases, and that allows for a sustainable
That's the key.
transfer from individual buildings.
It's too big to do in one
larger
shot,
ones.
obviously. But I'm hearing all the needs of each individual building needs to be either moved for logistic reasons or size reasons. So let's plan how that's going to go.
Thank
We have
you.
the ARPA money available, maybe a small portion of it, a few $100,000 could go towards that plan.
And we might get to ARPA here pretty soon. When you look at how I've talked about this, is there something that you would like me to add? I'm looking over here, shifting towards a consolidated building complex. This may require significant time, energy, expense in the long term. Master plan to work towards in phases.
As you indicate, all the need for the individual buildings is mentioned, right? Capital need, that's not really. So that's how to handle the capital enter inside of it.
Yes. And you're talking about how to transition from one to the next.
Yeah, it's hard. That's a hard project, obviously, but have resources we wouldn't otherwise have. Maybe take that opportunity.
Thank you, Kim. I think there was a comment online. I see Will's hand is up, and I'm also encouraging anyone who hasn't commented yet to let us know if you are sitting on a comment. Go ahead, Will.
So thank you. My comment is, what would you be willing to pay for? I just want to agree with the idea of the municipal complex and basically replacement of buildings. And the reason that I think it's worth it for paying more is because, first of all, we have probably a once in a generation opportunity to leverage federal funds that are not going to come along again. But secondly, we've already seen on the Energy Committee that even with the help of Tom Yandow and many others who've put some work into it, we're not going to make those existing buildings any more efficient than they are. Whereas if we had a new complex, we could potentially be looking at net zero buildings which would save a lot of operating cost in the long run. In terms of what I would be cautious about paying for, I think it actually goes to the other component of what we were talking about, and that's things like new fire trucks, new public works vehicles. I really feel we got to look at closely whether there are opportunities to get alternative electric or alternative fuel vehicles, and that we not just buy whatever is available at the time because we really need it. I think we'd be better off if we could go about some of those purchases over a longer period of time and use what we have so that we can get the latest technologies that, again, in the long run are going to reduce that gasoline bill that we see in the town budget each and every year, and which really, for the sake of the community, for the sake of the planet, we need to start getting that to be a lot lower.
Thanks, Will. I'm going to take a minute to finish up these notes. And hopefully that gives a second for folks who haven't spoken yet to be able to raise their hand if they have a comment. I don't see any hands. Does that mean that there aren't comments, or just that, again, you can catch our attention by waving, by turning off your microphone and speaking, turning on your video. How about in the
I
room?
hate to do this, but I guess I got to.
Why is that? If you're going to speak, Walter, come up to the microphone, please.
The concept that the town would build a bunch of buildings that were net zero is a complete farce. The cost to build a net zero building in today's environment is extraordinarily high.
So
You
would be
need to
cautious.
understand that.
I am going to do a little
and
bit
so,
of translation.
but the point is, yes, your building might be net zero, but this building didn't get torn down. So someone moves in here and this fuel use still goes on. So I spent $12 million to build a new one, And yes, I have a zero bill, but I'm paying a humongous number for my bond. And somebody is still buying electricity and fuel to keep this one going
Okay, so
because
you're speaking.
it is.
You're
So,
speaking about the value of in terms of net zero and the different not wanting to leave hidden. You're looking at the impacts of building a net zero building, Walter, and
I'm not looking at the impact. I'm saying to you that the concept of a net zero, first of all, nobody should be considering getting rid of fossil fuel for at least 20 years because that doesn't make any sense, at least until.
here's what I'm going to
20
ask you
years
to
from now.
do.
So
here's what I'm going to ask you to do because I think you've got something important there, and I'm having a hard time. I'm having a hard time catching it. So when you look at these pieces, what you'd be willing to pay for if it meant paying more, I think what you're trying to give is what you'd be cautious about paying for, and that's what I'm trying to grab, and I'm losing it. What would you be cautious
okay, so
about paying for?
the first issue is you have $3.5 million.
Well, if
Let's assume that you took all of the ARPA money and you wanted to build the fire station tomorrow, the police station. You wanted to build another police station, just as an example. That $7 million building today is between $10 and $11 million and is no more efficient than what you already have. So the idea that you would replace this without spending humongous money, I mean, big money, and or a new town garage or something similar, and to make them net zero means that you'll be right out there. Now, do I think that
Walter?
that in the long run that might make sense? 20 years from now, absolutely. I think by then the technologies will have matured and it makes a lot of sense.
Part of what you're saying right now is that it's an overwhelming choice to be looking at given the circumstances.
Right. So
that
if
the
you
town is
said,
in.
I've got $3.6 million, I think you would be hard pressed to find a piece of property that you could technically assume was big enough to put a municipal facility on in the right place for your $3.6 million. And that's just the land.
Okay.
So the
part
idea
of-
that
so-
you want
sorry,
to invest
Walter.
that whole $3.6 million to buy a piece of land,
Right.
and then you're still got to fight the war.
Here's
for
the trick I'm having. I don't know if we're going to be able to solve it right here.
Well, no, I'm not asking you to. I'm
Right,
just saying,
but here's
if
what
you start looking at a municipal complex kind of package, forget about what the buildings cost you. First of all, you got to find a piece of land that you like,
That's
put
what
it
I
in the
can-
right place.
That is what I can note here, and I think that's where I probably am going to have to leave it because I don't know how much else I can piece. But when you're listening to this conversation about the consolidated building complex, part of what you're seeing and you're overly cautious about is it's a huge investment even just for the land right now, or it's a huge investment up front, and the trade-offs don't make sense.
I'm not sure that anybody's going to want to spend that money anytime in the near future, especially given what appears to be the rate increases, irregardless of what the town's is. If what I hear about what's happening at the school district is true, we're really going to be in deep trouble.
Okay.
Do you envision that this 2% is going to be, the 2 cents is going to be 3, 4 in the next budget?
That's a conversation I think we have to have.
I mean, 3 basically replaces what you got, I think, if it's kind of number.
Roughly.
And 4 gives you a few more dollars. Or some 3.5 or some number thereabouts. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Walter. As I often do, I feel like there are so many nuances that I am missing that people really do want me to be capturing. And so I'm going to put my apology out there that I think there are nuances in what you're saying that I am missing. And also acknowledge that this conversation is so tricky and so nuanced that you're probably having, as a group and as a town, dozens of conversations at the same time. And so one of the things that I'm hoping to do is chunk some of them out so that there are some clear inputs for folks who are trying to figure out how are people weighing these decisions. It is complex. And it might be a dream to think that we can simplify it. I don't think it gets simplified. I think it just gets illustrated in many different ways. Is there anybody who's online right now in particular? And I'm saying online because there's only 3 of you in here and you've had a good amount of airtime. I don't know if I'm missing comments of those of you who are in our Zoom room. If you haven't spoken yet and you have a comment in particular, I'm looking for answers to these questions. What would you be willing to pay for if it meant paying more around capital needs? What would you be cautious about paying for and why? Please let me know. There are a couple of you who I think turned off your microphones, and I don't know if that was just by accident or if you're trying to catch my attention because you had a comment. But if so, Could you turn off your microphone and say hello so that we can catch your name and your comment? So that's very helpful. Some of you are turning your microphones off so I can see that that's just an oversight. Thank you for that. David, are you waiting for on air time? If so, the air is yours for a moment. Not, I'm going to move to Ross. Go ahead, Ross.
Yeah, I just want to make one observation about tax increases. One of the things that we're all hearing about is the affordability of housing stock in Vermont, and particularly in Chittenden County. And I think the board needs to be mindful of the level of tax burden that homeowners, existing homeowners, can sustain, and what is desirable in terms of attracting new homeowners.
Mm-hmm. So you're wondering, this quandary, you're wondering about what existing homeowners can sustain for their taxes in particular.
Yeah, many of us are on fixed income, and everything keeps going up.
Yeah.
And our incomes don't go up. And then if we're trying to attract new workers and people into the community, it's hard to do it when your tax rates are really high. One of the things that attracted me to Essex when I moved here 6 years ago is it had a reasonably low tax rate, and now I find 6 years later that it's going to jump, and I'm not going to turn around and sell the house that I just bought.
Right. Yep. And it's been a profound shift and a profound vote that took place since you moved here.
All I'm saying is there is a limit as to how much you can raise taxes and it still be palatable to both existing homeowners and new homeowners.
Yep. Thanks, Ross.
But I will point out,
I'm not going to hold that, Walter, and it's because I know there's another voice I haven't heard from yet, and because we have 15 minutes left in this meeting with ARPA funds left to go. How much time do you need for your presentation? It's brief.
I'll be real quick.
Is there any person online around capital needs who is sitting on a comment and hasn't gotten a chance to share it yet? I think we're good there then. So let's make the shift then to ARPA funds. Marguerite, I'll pass it to you. And then Natalie, you've been waiting since the first part of this open comment, so we'll go to you next in the queue. Go ahead, Marguerite.
Okay, I have a little slide I can share in a moment. Yes, sorry. It's asking me about sharing my screen. Let's do that. Great. My way.
Is there anything I can do to help?
No, you're fine. It's just this. Okay, so we're just gonna go here. Get my present. How do I move? There we go. Zoom toolbar out of the way. Okay, so I've talked about ARPA before, so I'm going to be pretty quick here. And essentially, the biggest thing that I want to talk about just tonight is kind of, we'll give a little background here really quickly. The town received basically $3.3 million. And what I want to be specific about here that we saw some questions about in the survey is that the city received its own funding. That's all the town's funding. That's not the town's not talking about how to spend the cities. This is the city got its own allotment. It's had its own discussions. So 3.2, basically 3.3 million is just the town. So just to clarify that for everyone, and to just remind everyone that it needs to be allocated by December 31st, 2024, and then spent by December 31st, 2026. So that has to do with, as we talk about leveraging these government funds, federal funds, state funds that we've talked about a little bit here, all of that has to sort of be wrapped up into those dates as well. So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind as you think about different ways to spend it, or things that are on your mind and discussions to have, that is that there is a bit of a clock on this. So that's just part of that discussion. On April 18th, 2022, so just a few months ago, the select board made a one-time irrevocable standard allowance for the ARPA funding. Short story is that it makes it very flexible for us for how to spend it, but there are still restrictions to how we can spend that. And they are listed here. They're on our website. I won't go into them here given our time, but just so that we're clear, there are still some restrictions there, although we do have the most flexibility allowed for this money that has come in. So we just closed the survey, so we haven't been able to go through it totally and dig into it really, but we will post it all on the website as soon as we've gotten it all downloaded and kind of gotten it in a way that we can post it on there that people can read and it's not too tiny and all of those things. But the biggest thing sort of that we saw first was out of the ranking, the top 5 is what I have here, and it's infrastructure projects, transportation projects, town building projects, tax relief, and projects mitigating climate change. So that is a very, very high level of this survey, and I just want to be clear about that. And we, that data is going to be put all out there. It's totally public. We're just moving it right now from the survey, and we want to make sure that it's clear when we put it out there. People can read it and know, and the less, it's just not confusing, I guess, is sort of what we're going for, obviously. So with that, I'm pretty much done. I just wanted to at least get that out there for folks that, it was 199 folks who answered the survey. All that will be on there too. I guess just thinking about that, we're trying to hear from you tonight and then also next week. And then we're going to go from there and sort of make a plan a little further for what our next steps might be for narrowing down what we hear or getting closer to what you all are thinking about. I think that's all I have.
Natalie, let's go right to you and see what your comment was. Are you still there?
I am so excited to have made it into the top 5 on the order of importance. I'm 5, but I'm in there. So I'm all in on the idea of tax money being well spent. Love the idea of efficiency. What would break my heart is to see any of our city coffers, yes, town coffers, pardon me, or city coffers drained because of having to respond to the substantial cost of recovery from climate change related events. Mm-hmm. And either emergency relief or longer term disaster relief. It would be impossible, if you are listening to the news, not to recognize that this is an accelerating emergency. And I feel that the use of some segment of our ARPA funds, and folks have already spoken. By the way, I should say Will Dodge entirely laid the groundwork for my comments here. I could almost step back and say nothing, but I have a couple of specifics. That if we are using some segment of those ARPA funds around climate change mitigation, because the short-term gain of not doing that, but the long-term pain is, I think, difficult to comprehend for most people. I spend a lot of time working and thinking in this area. So if we put some of our thinking toward weatherization, development of alternative energy sources, and the gentleman who spoke about the master plan and the efficiency and the money savings, not that the ARPA funds would come close to funding those, but perhaps a consultant could be hired, pardon me, to help us find the biggest bang for our buck around reducing our greenhouse gases, energy efficiency, ergo money efficiency over time, monetary efficiency. And with the double thing of helping our budget as well as assisting in moving us away from being any substantial contributor to a global catastrophe that is evolving under our feet, before our eyes. So I'd love to see some of our ARPA funds spent, weatherization, development of alternative energy sources, especially solar, perhaps an energy or efficiency consultant. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks, Natalie. David, it looks like you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to, I'm probably muted.
You're not. You're good. We can hear you fine.
Fine. Okay. Okay. I just wanted to say that I've listened to what Will Dodge and Natalie Braun have had to say, and I am 1,000% behind them. And I cannot add anything except that I too feel that we're staring down the barrel of a loaded gun, and the climate should really be a top priority, if at all possible. I know we have thousands of different issues to deal with, and they're all important, but Mother Nature will prove to be the boss here, and it behooves us to do everything we possibly can to move forward in climate mitigation. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, David. Are there others that we haven't heard from yet that are waiting with a comment? So Lorraine, I see your hands up. I'm just going to take another minute and or maybe 5 seconds. Are there others online? Because we're going to prepare to wrap up at 7:30, you haven't spoken yet, who have something that they'd like to say. Go ahead, Lorraine.
A quick comment on some of Walter's concerns. I think what I'm hearing him say is his concern about spending money wastefully, and that some of the issues that we had around the police station, maybe there's a way to make sure the contractors that we bid out to are rated and so on and so forth, that there's a way to meet Walter's concerns in a responsive way. So that's something I'd want built into the work that we do as well. I 100% agree with the Energy Committee. We are looking at a lot of expense in the future if we don't build resiliency now, which hopefully if we do build out, or some of the capital expenses that we're looking at in the future, like fire department and whatever, we also look at capitalizing on some of the federal funds that will have, like, can add a charging station or solar panels to the roof or so on and so forth. To me, there's a way to combine some of the funding and leverage some of that funding in terms of some of the capital projects that we have coming down the pike. Thanks.
Lorraine, thank you so much. We have 5 minutes left or so. Is there anybody else online? Then Ken and Walter, if not, we'll fit you in. Will, is your hand still up because you have a new comment, or because it's just still up?
Yeah, just a new brief comment. I appreciate the reasons why the survey was done, but I just hope we aren't collectively daft about this and think that those are actually choices between different topics. I mean, all of those things are so complementary with one another, especially transportation, the town municipal buildings, and climate change. If we focus on all of those things together, it is certain to help with ultimately not having this constant tax increases that I think Walter and others have complained about over time. The whole point is to be more comfortable, to be more sustainable, to have the community be more enjoyable to be in, but without seeing costs constantly go up because we are trying to keep up against the global threat of climate change. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. Ken and Walter. Ken first, then Walter.
Gotta be brief.
We're on the clock, so
Yep,
yes,
I know,
brief, please.
So the word leverage came up, and I think that's really important. We have capital projects already in the queue. Great example is the Indian Brook Reservoir Dam. There's money for that already. I've heard Dennis Lutz suggest that when we do that repair, that we'd spend a little extra money and put in a mechanism for level control. Great idea for mitigating potential climate change damage. If we know there's a flood coming, we can lower the level, buffer that change, and potentially downstream save some expense. So we had what? In the 2019 washout, we had what, 3 or 4 roads washout, I think it was?
Mhm.
Maybe we could limit that and make it a little less. So leveraging is the key for existing capital projects. That's a great way to extend that ARPA money.
I'm going to add that to the list of capital needs as a note. Thanks, Ken. Go ahead, Walter. You'll need to come up, I think, to the microphone.
Ken actually spoke to one of the items that I was thinking about, which is Indian Brook Dam. The Corps of Engineer report says that should that dam fail catastrophically during a storm, there will be 16 feet of water in your parking lot, which would make a new building kind of imperative at that point. And the other thing is, I'm assuming that Mr. Martin or someone at the Public Works Department can provide a list of roads that are imminently need repair, so that some of that money could be used in road repair that we might otherwise have to spread out over a significant number of years. I just find it hard to believe at even though it's 3.6 sounds like a parcel full of money,
It's
it
not.
just
Yep.
isn't going to go very far, unfortunately. But I do think that at some point you need to, if you're going to do climate mitigation, I think fixing Indian Brook Dam, just as Ken said, makes a lot of sense because it has other ramifications when you do fix it.
Yep.
And then doing something about the roads that we might have spent money for in the future, doing them now or as soon now as is reasonable given contractor requirements, makes a lot of sense as well. So there I am. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Walter. I'm going to add that as well to the capital needs list about what would you be willing to pay for if it meant paying more, assess imminent needs like road repairs and strategies to leverage current capital fund projects for climate change action like Indian Brook Reservoir. What did you call it? Leveling? Well, not leveraging. I mean the actual project, Indian Brook project.
Oh, variable level control.
Thank you.
Variable wheel.
Excellent. So that brings us to 7:30. So I am preparing to wrap things up, but before we go, a couple things to acknowledge. There is an awful lot of ground that you covered, and I probably only anticipated a fraction of it. And what I thought might fall into neat categories, that doesn't. But that's an illustration potentially of how, it is an illustration of how complex this is, and also underscores the importance of this being an iterative kind of process and an iterative discussion that takes many different forms. I think to one of the folks who had called in online, the importance of having this conversation in many different ways with different people at different times to try to get as many different voices into the mix as possible. Of which tonight is just the beginning. So if people, I'm looking at next steps now and wondering if you want to highlight or reinforce how people would stay in touch, who's listening to the stuff that comes out of today, and if people weren't able to get any input, or if they think about it a couple days from now, and clearly you will because your thinking will continue to evolve, what would they do with it?
A few things. We have information on our website. You can always email myself. My email is gduggan, DUGGAN @essex.org. You can also email manager@essex.org. We have been compiling ideas on how to use ARPA funds for months now, from the select board, from residents, from staff. We will keep updating that list. We will be using it to eventually put together a proposal in the near future, probably tying in with the budget. We have another one of these sessions happening next week, Thursday, August 4th at 11:30 to 1, trying to get a different time in there, maybe at lunch break for some folks. Same concept. We'll be here in person. We'll also have the hybrid option. And then keep checking our website, Front Porch Forum, Facebook. We try to use all those venues to get the word out about when meetings are happening, when we're collecting input, and we are always open to new ideas of how to do that too. So same outreach, manager at essex.org is probably the best way to share some of those ideas and keep them coming. Thank you all for giving up a nice summer night to be here with us. That is appreciated, and thanks for the comments. And hope to keep hearing from everybody as we go through this process over the next few months. So thank you.